The maid was ignored by her millionaire husband, until at the party. She appeared in a short dress, and he burned with jealousy. Before we continue, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let us continue the story. The night began, like any other, in the glittering skyline of Manhattan, where glass towers swallowed the moonlight, and the air smelled faintly of money and rain. Inside the penthouse of Ashcroft Dynamics, everything gleamed, except for the marriage of Quentin Ashcroft and the woman who used to be his maid, Florencia Paredes. The walls were white marble, the view endless, but between them stretched a silence heavier than the city below. He sat behind his desk, perfectly tailored suit, scrolling through numbers and emails, pretending not to notice the quiet figure clearing the untouched dinner he had ordered but never ate. She moved with quiet grace, her simple gray dress and tied-back hair making her look invisible in the mansion that was now, technically, hers. But titles meant nothing when love was missing. Florencia had not always been invisible. Just 6 months earlier, she was the housekeeper who never missed a detail, the woman who pressed his shirts and kept his world immaculate. Then came the night of the scandal. One photograph, one rumor, and Quentin's board demanded he appear stable, married, and respectable before they renewed his contract. His publicist found the perfect solution: the loyal maid, untainted by fame, unconnected to tabloids. A marriage of convenience, signed in ink and silence. 3 months, they said. 3 events. 0 emotions. But the papers had not predicted the cost of pretending. Every morning, Florencia played her role. Every night, he ignored her. He slept in his office more often than in the bed they technically shared. He was courteous, distant, a man who loved control more than connection. And yet, something in his chest shifted every time she walked into the room, something he refused to name. She, on the other hand, had learned to bury her feelings deep beneath layers of self-control and professionalism. It was easier to scrub the floor than to scrub out the ache of being unwanted. That evening, as thunder rolled over the city, Quentin's voice broke the silence. "The Investors' Gala is tomorrow night. You will attend." It was not a question. He did not look up from his laptop as he spoke. Florencia froze mid-step, holding a tray. "Of course, sir," she said softly, though her heart sank. Another night of pretending, another night of being paraded as decoration. He finally looked at her then, his gaze cool, assessing. "Wear something appropriate. Remember what this arrangement is." The words sliced deeper than he knew. She nodded, eyes steady but voice trembling. "Yes, Mr. Ashcroft." When she turned away, a small silver ring on her hand caught the city's light, a ring he had given her on their wedding day. It was not real diamond, only glass, a prop for the cameras. But sometimes, when she was alone, she turned it on her finger and whispered, "Maybe one day, the feeling will be real." Outside, the rain began to fall harder, tapping against the windows like an impatient knock from fate itself. And somewhere between the hum of the storm and the quiet ache of her heart, Florencia made a silent promise to stop being invisible. "Please stay with me, because this is the night when everything changes. The night a forgotten wife steps into the spotlight and a cold-hearted millionaire learns what jealousy feels like." Now, let us return to our main character, Florencia Paredes. Morning light slides across the glass walls of the Ashcroft penthouse, painting gold lines over the city below. The storm from the night before has passed, but inside the apartment, the air is still heavy. Florencia wakes before sunrise, as she always does. Her habits from years of working as a maid never left her. She brews coffee quietly, sets out breakfast, and leaves a file on Quentin's desk with the day's schedule prepared by his assistant. He never thanks her, but she does it anyway. Kindness, she believes, should never depend on recognition. The clock ticks softly as she ties her hair back. The gala is tonight, the one he mentioned so coldly. She knows what it means: cameras, investors, and whispers about their so-called perfect marriage. The thought tightens her chest, but she straightens her shoulders. She will not be pitied. When Quentin enters the kitchen, he looks immaculate as always. Dark suit, watch gleaming, phone in hand. He barely glances at the breakfast she prepared. "The car will pick us up at 7. "Be ready," he says without looking up. She nods. "Yes, Mr. Ashcroft?" Her voice is calm, but something inside her cracks a little each time he calls her that. Not Florencia, not even Florence, the way his assistant sometimes does. Just Mr. Ashcroft's employee, living under the same roof. After he leaves, the silence returns. Florencia cleans the empty dishes, then sits by the window with her sketchbook. She draws the city's outline bridges, roofs, and windows, places she has never been but dreams of. Art has always been her secret escape. Her mother used to say, "When you cannot speak, draw." Now those sketches are her only confessions. On one corner of the page, she writes a single line, "If I cannot be seen, I will still exist in color." Hours pass. The housekeeper, Mrs. Lang, arrives to help with preparations. "Miss Paredes, you are going to the gala?" she asks gently. Florencia nods. "Apparently I am." The older woman smiles knowingly. "Then do not wear gray. Gray is for people who want to disappear." Draped. Later that afternoon, a stylist from the agency arrives with dresses. Most are elegant but safe black, navy, champagne. Florencia hesitates over one at the back, a short satin dress the color of soft rose. It is nothing like the gowns Quentin prefers. It is playful, alive, a little defiant. "That one," she says quietly. The stylist blinks. "Are you sure? It is bold." Florencia smiles faintly. "Exactly." As the sun dips below the skyscrapers, Quentin returns. He finds her standing by the window, hair curled loosely, makeup soft but confident. When she turns, his breath catches without warning. The short dress catches the light, glimmering with every small movement. "You are early," he says, covering the flicker of surprise in his tone. She answers evenly, "You told me to be ready." Their eyes meet for a moment longer than either expects. Something unspoken passes between them, recognition, maybe even admiration, but he looks away first. In the car, the city lights blur through tinted glass. Quentin scrolls through his phone, pretending not to notice the way her perfume lingers in the air. Yet his reflection in the window betrays him. He looks at her more than once, silently asking himself when she stopped looking like an obligation and started looking like something else. At the entrance of the hotel ballroom, flashes burst like lightning. Reporters call his name, cameras click, and the perfect image of success is reborn. He places a hand lightly on her back, guiding her forward. "Smile," he whispers, his tone professional. She does, but her smile holds a quiet rebellion, a calm that unnerves him more than anger would. Inside, chandeliers spill light across polished marble floors. The orchestra hums. Conversations buzz. When people greet Quentin, they glance at Florencia with curiosity, then whisper after she passes. He pretends not to hear, but every laugh, every glance, lands sharper than he expects. And when one investor's wife murmurs, "She was your maid, was she not?" Quentin's jaw tightens. "She is my wife," he says flatly. The woman steps back, startled. For the first time, he realizes the weight of those words. My wife. Not contract, not convenience. For one heartbeat, it feels real. Florencia stands a few steps away, unaware of his inner storm. She looks radiant under the golden light, talking softly with another guest, her laughter gentle but sure. Quentin's gaze lingers, unguarded, and in that moment he understands jealousy not as anger, but as the fear of losing something he never allowed himself to claim. He looks down at his glass of champagne, the bubbles catching reflections of her dress, and thinks, maybe I should have looked at her sooner. The orchestra plays a slow, elegant waltz as Quentin stands among the investors, pretending to listen. He nods at the right moments, smiles when required, but his thoughts are elsewhere. Across the ballroom, Florencia is laughing with the chief architect from his company, a man in his 40s with easy charm and kind eyes. Quentin watches the way her lips curve, the way her hand gestures as she speaks, how her shoulders relax in a way they never do around him. His jaw tightens. His fingers curl around the champagne glass until the cold seeps into his palm. For months, he ignored her existence, convinced that keeping things professional would protect them both. Now, watching her surrounded by light, he feels something sharp twist in his chest, something he cannot label as pride or irritation. It feels dangerously close to jealousy. He excuses himself from the group and crosses the room. Every step feels heavier than it should. The music swells, and when he reaches her, Florencia turns, startled by his sudden presence. "Mr. Ashcroft," she says softly, her voice formal, the title deliberate. The man beside her smiles politely. Your wife was just telling me about her sketches. You never mentioned she is an artist. Quentin forces a smile. There are many things I have yet to mention, he says smoothly, though his tone holds an edge that only Florencia hears. The architect, sensing tension, excuses himself quickly. As soon as they are alone, Quentin lowers his voice. You seem to be enjoying yourself. Florencia meets his gaze calmly. I am being polite as you asked me to be. His brow furrows. That dress, it is shorter than expected. She tilts her head slightly. You said to look appropriate. This is appropriate for me. Her tone is even, but her eyes spark with quiet defiance. Do you have a problem with that? Quentin's throat tightens. He does not know how to answer. The room feels warmer suddenly, his pulse loud in his ears. You are drawing attention, he says finally. Florencia smiles faintly. That is ironic, considering you never noticed me at all before tonight. The words hit him harder than he expects. He opens his mouth to respond, but she has already turned away, walking toward the balcony, the soft light of chandeliers gliding over her bare shoulders. Outside, the night air is cool, the city below a sea of glittering windows. Florencia leans against the railing, exhaling slowly. For months, she carried the weight of silence, but tonight, she feels alive again. The music fades behind the glass, replaced by the faint hum of traffic far below. She hears the door open behind her and knows it is him before he speaks. You should not walk away like that, Quentin says quietly. She glances over her shoulder. Why? Are you afraid the guests will think the perfect marriage is cracking? His silence is answer enough. He steps closer, his voice lower. You look different tonight. Different? She echoes, turning to face him fully. Or finally visible? The city wind lifts a strand of her hair, and for a moment he almost reaches out to tuck it behind her ear, but he stops himself. Old habits of restraint pull him back. You are not what I expected, he admits, the words escaping before he can stop them. And what did you expect, Quentin? She asks, his name soft yet charged. A maid who stays quiet? A wife who never speaks? He looks at her, truly looks, maybe for the first time. I expected someone who would not make me feel this uncertain. The honesty in his tone startles them both. The silence stretches, filled only by the pulse of the city. Florencia holds his gaze, her heart racing. Uncertainty means you are finally feeling something real, she says, her voice barely above a whisper. Maybe that is not such a bad thing. A waiter passes by inside, and the noise of laughter spills briefly through the open doors. Quentin takes a step back as if remembering where they are. He smooths his tie, mask slipping back into place. The car will be ready soon, he says. Do not stay out too long. Florencia nods, but her eyes linger on him. As he walks away, she exhales a shaky breath, unsure whether to feel victorious or heartbroken. Behind her, the city stretches endlessly, a maze of light and shadow. She realizes that something has changed between them, something irreversible. For the first time, she has seen his eyes not as a CEO's, but as a man's, vulnerable and conflicted. And deep down, beneath her quiet pride, a dangerous hope begins to stir. The following morning, the city wakes beneath a pale winter sun, and the penthouse feels heavier than ever. Florencia stands by the kitchen window, her fingers wrapped around a mug of coffee gone cold. The night at the gala replays in her mind again and again the tension in Quentin's voice, the way his eyes softened for one impossible second before he pulled back behind that familiar wall. She tells herself it meant nothing, that it was only the pressure of the evening, but her heart refuses to listen. In the quiet, she hears the faint sound of the elevator opening. Quentin steps out, his expression unreadable, his tie loosened from another sleepless night at the office. Their eyes meet briefly. He nods in greeting, nothing more, and heads toward his study. She watches him go, 1,000 unsaid words trapped in her throat. Hours pass. Quentin buries himself in meetings, pretending not to notice how her absence from the living room feels like a missing rhythm. He tells himself that he does not need her presence, yet his focus drifts. During a video call, he finds his gaze fixed on the reflection of the balcony where she usually waters the plants she insisted on keeping alive. When the meeting ends, he rubs his temples, frustrated by the ache behind his eyes, and the thought that keeps returning uninvited. She was right. I never looked at her until someone else did. By late afternoon, Florencia is in her small studio room, the one that used to be a storage space before she turned it into her private corner. Sketches cover the wall's faces, street corners, fragments of memory. Today, She sketches a man's silhouette standing at the edge of a balcony, his posture rigid but lonely. When she finishes, she sets down the pencil and sighs. Enough, she whispers to herself, closing the sketchbook. No more pretending. She decides to leave the penthouse for a while, to walk through the city that feels more like home than this glass palace ever did. When she steps outside, the cold bites her skin, but the wind feels freeing. She takes the subway downtown, where life moves fast and unfiltered. At a small cafe tucked between bookstores, she orders tea and sits by the window, watching people rush past. For a few hours, she allows herself to be just Florencia Paredes, again a woman without contracts, titles, or expectations. Back in the penthouse, Quentin returns early for the first time in weeks. The apartment is empty except for the faint echo of her soft humming that used to fill the space. He notices her sketchbook on the side table, left open by mistake. Against his better judgment he looks. Inside, he sees her world drawn in pencil, the city skyline, a lonely woman by the window, a man standing beside her but never facing her. One page stops him cold. It is a sketch of himself, not as a CEO but as a man staring out into the dark, the same sadness he hides from the world etched perfectly in graphite. For the first time, Quentin feels exposed, seen in a way he never allowed anyone to see him. The sound of the elevator startles him. Florencia steps in, cheeks flushed from the cold, her coat damp from light snow. Their eyes meet, and an unspoken tension fills the air. "You are home early," she says, setting down her scarf. "So are you," he replies quietly. Silence stretches, fragile but full. He holds up the sketchbook, his voice low. "You left this open." She freezes. "You were not supposed to see that." "Why?" he asks. "Because it is too honest?" Her lips part, but no words come out. Quentin steps closer. "You drew me, Florencia. Not the man in the papers, not the CEO in the suit. You drew the one I try to forget exists." His voice softens, the edge gone. "Why?" She looks down, hands trembling slightly. "Because I needed to remember you are human," she whispers, "even when you forget." The words hang in the air like a confession neither of them can take back. For a long moment he says nothing. Then quietly he closes the sketchbook and places it on the table between them. "I do not deserve to be remembered that way," he says. "Maybe not," she answers, her tone calm but sad. "But it is the only way I know how to forgive you." Come. Outside, snow begins to fall, soft and soundless, covering the city in white. Quentin watches her turn away, realizing that for all his wealth and control, this woman, the one he once ignored, is the only truth he has left. And for the first time, he feels the weight of what it means to lose something real before ever having the courage to hold it. The next few days move slowly, like the city itself is holding its breath. The snow outside melts into gray slush, but inside the Ashcroft penthouse, the air remains frozen between two people who no longer know what to say. Quentin avoids the subject of the sketchbook. Florencia pretends nothing happened, though every quiet meal feels like a battlefield of unsaid thoughts. Yet something invisible has changed. The distance that once protected them now feels like a cage. Every time their eyes meet, a spark of unfinished conversation flickers between them. On Friday morning, Quentin's assistant calls to remind him of the company's annual charity auction that evening. It is a prestigious event, one that attracts the press and half of New York's elite. He hesitates, remembering the chaos of the last gala, the whispers, the jealousy that still lingers like smoke. But he knows the company expects them both to attend. He finds Florencia in the living room, folding laundry by the window. "The charity auction is tonight," he says flatly. "You will come with me." She looks up, surprised. "Is that an order or an invitation?" He blinks, caught off guard by the quiet steel in her tone. "It is a request," he corrects himself. Her lips lift in the smallest smile. "Then I will go." That evening, Florencia chooses a long silver gown, simple but luminous. The fabric drapes like liquid light, catching every movement. Quentin watches from the doorway as she adjusts her earrings. "You look," he starts, then stops, unable to find the right word. "Different?" she offers, remembering his hesitation from the last event. He exhales. "No. You look like yourself." The softness in his voice catches her off guard. For a brief moment they both forget the terms that bind them. The event takes place in a grand hall overlooking Central Park. Cameras flash, guests murmur greetings, and waiters move through the crowd carrying glasses of champagne. Florencia walks beside him, her posture poised but unpretentious, her calm presence drawing more attention than any designer dress could. Quentin feels the eyes of the board members on them, feels the shift in their judgment. The maid-turned-wife no longer looks like a scandal. She looks like grace. Midway through the night, the auction begins. Quentin is called to the stage to announce the company's donation. He delivers his speech with practiced charm, his voice steady. But when he glances down at the audience, his eyes find Florencia's, and something falters. For once, he loses his rhythm. He clears his throat and finishes quickly, retreating from the podium with his composure cracked. His business partner, Lucas, claps him on the shoulder. "You are human after all," Lucas teases, laughing. Quentin forces a smile, but his mind is already elsewhere. Later, during the dinner hour, Florencia steps away from the table to find some quiet air. She ends up on the terrace, where the winter wind carries the muffled sound of music and laughter from inside. She leans against the railing, looking over the glowing park below. Behind her, footsteps approach. "You have a habit of running away from crowds," Quentin says softly. She turns to see him holding 2 cups of coffee instead of champagne. "And you have a habit of finding me?" she replies, accepting 1 cup. He stands beside her, both of them silent for a long moment. "I read the rest of your sketchbook," he says finally. Her breath catches. "You had no right." "I know," he admits, "but I could not stop." "You draw what I hide from everyone else." He turns to face her. "Do you hate me for what I did, for how I treated you?" She studies his face in the dim light. "I wanted to," she says quietly. "But hate requires attention. You ignored me too completely for that." His throat tightens. "And now?" She meets his gaze steadily. "Now I see the man behind the silence, and that is harder to forget." For the first time, Quentin reaches out, his hand brushing against hers. The touch is hesitant but real, the kind of small gesture that carries more truth than words. "Florencia," he begins, but before he can say more, a voice interrupts from the doorway. It is the head of the board, smiling too widely. "Mr. Ashcroft, the press would like a photo of you and your lovely wife." Quentin straightens instantly, the mask sliding back on. "Of course," he says smoothly. Florencia sets down her cup and offers her arm. Together, they step back into the warm light of the ballroom, the world watching. As the flash of cameras blinds them, she feels his hand tighten slightly around hers, not as a command this time, but as something that feels dangerously close to a promise. And though the crowd sees only perfection, only the polished image of power and wealth, both of them know the truth. Beneath the surface, the contract has already begun to crumble, and something far more fragile and far more real is taking its place. That night, after the cameras fade and the music dies down, Quentin and Florencia return to the penthouse in silence. The city lights blur past the car window like streaks of memory neither can escape. The chauffeur opens the door, but neither moves for a moment. It is as if stepping back into that glass tower means returning to the same emptiness they both tried to leave behind. Florencia is the first to speak, her voice soft but steady. "You held my hand in front of everyone," she says quietly. "Was that part of the act too?" Quentin meets her gaze, his jaw tightening. "I did not plan it," he admits. "I just did not want to let go." The words slip out before he can stop them, and something fragile cracks open between them. Upstairs, the penthouse feels strangely different. The air is warmer, the silence less hostile. Quentin removes his jacket and watches her from across the room. She unpins her earrings, places them carefully on the dresser, and catches his reflection in the mirror. "You do not have to keep pretending when it is just us," she says. He looks at her, then away. "Maybe I do not know how to stop." "La." Florencia turns slowly, her eyes meeting his. "You know how to build empires, negotiate million-dollar deals, control every headline. But you do not know how to be real, do you?" Her tone is not cruel, only tired. He does not answer. Instead, he walks to the window, hands in his pockets. "Being real has a price," he says after a pause. "I learned that a long time ago." She steps closer, stopping a few feet behind him. "Maybe that is why you built these walls so high, so no one could reach you." He turns then, the city's light cutting sharp lines across his face. "And you? Why did you agree to this arrangement, Florencia? You could have said no." She holds his gaze. "Because I needed to survive. Because sometimes survival means choosing the lesser pain." Her voice trembles, but her chin remains high. "And maybe because a part of me thought you were not as heartless as you pretend to be." For the first time, he lets out a quiet, humorless laugh. Heartless. Maybe I was, until you started drawing me. His tone softens. You see things I do not even see in myself. That is terrifying. The space between them narrows, filled with words neither dares to say. He takes a slow step forward, then another. When he is close enough to feel her breath, he stops. If this were not a contract, he says quietly, would you still be here? Florencia's eyes search his, looking for the man she once thought was made entirely of stone. If this were not a contract, she answers, you would not have noticed me in the first place. Her honesty hits him harder than any accusation could. He nods once, stepping back, afraid of how much truth her words hold. The next morning, Quentin leaves early for a board meeting. The news from the charity auction is everywhere, photos of them hand in hand, headlines calling them the perfect couple of Manhattan. The irony stings. Florencia scrolls through the articles, her stomach twisting. For everyone else, their story is a fairy tale. Only they know it is a fragile illusion. When he returns that evening, exhaustion lines his face. The board is pleased, he says, setting his briefcase down. The investors are happy. We managed to save everything. Everything except ourselves, she replies quietly. He freezes, not expecting the words to hit so precisely. She continues, you built your empire on control, Quentin. But you cannot control what you feel. That is why it scares you. He looks at her for a long time, the flicker of emotion crossing his face before he hides it again. You think I am scared of you? He asks, voice low. I think you are scared of needing someone, she says simply. Silence fills the room, but it feels alive this time. He takes a breath, and when he speaks again, his tone has changed. You might be right, he admits. But what happens when needing someone is no longer part of the plan? Florencia looks at him, her eyes steady, her heart breaking a little. Then you stop planning, she whispers, and you start living. For the first time since they signed that paper, Quentin smiles, not the practiced one he gives the press, but a real human smile, raw and uncertain. It feels like the beginning of something he does not yet understand. Outside, the snow starts falling again, soft against the glass, as if the city itself is trying to wash everything clean. Neither of them moves. They just stand there, side by side, two strangers who are starting to see what love might look like when it stops pretending. The next week begins with a strange calm that neither of them trusts. For a few fleeting days, the penthouse feels almost normal. Quentin works from home more often, his meetings echoing faintly through the glass walls, while Florencia spends her mornings sketching near the window. They speak more now, small talk at breakfast, quiet laughter at dinner, the kind of fragile peace that feels like standing on thin ice. But just as something warm begins to take root, the world outside decides to test them. It starts with a phone call on a gray Tuesday afternoon. Quentin is in his study when his assistant's voice trembles through the speaker. Sir, there has been a leak. Someone sent copies of your marriage contract to the press. The words hit him like a blow. He closes his eyes, every muscle in his body turning rigid. Who? He demands. We are not sure yet, but several outlets already have the documents. They will publish soon. Within hours, the internet is a wildfire. Headlines flash across every screen. Ashcroft marriage a business arrangement. Billionaire's wife revealed to be former maid. A love built on lies. Photos from their events flood social media, dissected and mocked. Reporters crowd outside the Ashcroft building, their microphones ready to feed on humiliation. Florencia sees the news on her phone and feels her breath leave her chest. Her hands shake as she scrolls through comments full of cruelty and disbelief. Every line cuts the same. She sold herself. She fooled him. Gold digger. By evening, Quentin bursts into the penthouse, his face pale with fury. Who leaked it? She asks before he can speak. Someone from the inside, he says sharply. Maybe a board member. Maybe a staff member who saw the file. He paces, running a hand through his hair. The investors are demanding an explanation. The board thinks you planned this to manipulate me, to gain sympathy. Florencia stares at him, stunned. You think I did this? She whispers. He stops pacing but does not answer. His silence is worse than accusation. Her eyes fill, not with tears, but with something colder disbelief. After everything, that is what you think of me? She says softly. I was your scapegoat once, when you needed a perfect image. I will not be your scapegoat again, now that it is falling apart. She turns away, trembling. You wanted a contract without feelings. Congratulations, Mr. Ashcroft. That is all it ever was. Yeah. Quentin opens his mouth to speak, but the sound dies in his throat. The words she said echo louder than the chaos outside. By the time he gathers his thoughts, she is already walking toward the elevator, her coat clutched around her shoulders. "Florencia, wait," he says, but she does not look back. The doors slide shut, leaving him alone with the headlines and his own regret. The next day, his world begins to crumble piece by piece. The board issues a statement distancing themselves from his personal matters. Clients postpone contracts. The company's stock dips for the first time in 3 years. Everywhere he goes, he hears whispers. Yet none of it hurts as much as the silence in the penthouse, the way her absence feels louder than the scandal itself. He goes to her old apartment in Queens, but the neighbors say she has moved out. He calls her phone, but it goes straight to voicemail. For the first time in his life, Quentin Ashcroft has no control, no solution, no plan. He sits in his car outside the cafe, where she once liked to draw, watching strangers walk in and out, hoping foolishly that one of them might be her. The rain begins to fall, steady and cold, tracing paths down the windshield like the outlines of a life he has broken. Back at the penthouse, he opens the sketchbook she left behind. On the last page, she had drawn 2 figures standing apart under falling snow. Between them, a single line of text reads, "When you finally learn how to see, it will already be too late." He closes the book, his chest tightening. For once, he does not hide from the truth. He had everything: power, wealth, pride, but none of it means anything without her. Outside, the media noise continues, but inside that empty penthouse, the only sound is the quiet hum of regret. Quentin stares out over the city he once ruled and whispers into the stillness, "I am sorry, Florencia." But the city does not answer, and neither does she. The empire he built now feels like a cage of glass, and for the first time he understands what it means to lose someone not through death but through his own blindness. Days turn into a week, and the scandal refuses to fade. The headlines scream his name every morning, each one twisting the knife a little deeper. Quentin sits alone in his office, the blinds drawn, the city humming far below. His phone buzzes with calls from lawyers, board members, and publicists, but he answers none of them. He has already given his statement to the media, half-truths, meant to protect the company, but the truth inside him festers like a wound. None of it matters now, because Florencia is gone, and with her went the only part of his life that ever felt real. One evening, when the city glows with that peculiar orange light before sunset, Quentin finally makes a decision. He calls a press conference, but not for the board, not for the investors. This one is for her. The reporters gather in the glass atrium of Ashcroft Dynamics, their cameras pointed toward the stage. He stands before them without a script, without his usual polished mask. The murmurs quiet when he begins to speak. "For the last few weeks," he says slowly, "you have all read about my marriage, my reputation, and my mistakes. Some of what you have heard is true, some of it is not. But one thing is certain, the woman at the center of it all does not deserve your ridicule." His voice steadies as he looks directly into the cameras. "Yes, our marriage began as a contract. That was my doing. I believed control could replace connection. I was wrong. She is not a scandal. She is not a lie. She is the most honest person I have ever known." The room falls silent. He pauses, then continues, his voice quieter now. "If Florencia Paredes is watching, I owe her this. I am sorry. Not for the leak, not for the headlines, but for failing to see her when she was right in front of me." He takes a breath. "And if this costs me everything, so be it. I would rather lose my empire than lose what is left of my humanity." With that, he steps down, ignoring the shouted questions. Outside, the evening air feels lighter, almost forgiving. For the first time, he does not run from the consequences. Florencia watches the broadcast from a small art studio in Brooklyn, where she has been volunteering to teach drawing to children. She never planned to see him again, but when his voice fills the room, she freezes. His words echo through the old walls, raw and unguarded. The children around her continue to chatter, but she cannot move. He looks different, tired, stripped of pride but sincere. A tear slides down her cheek before she can stop it. She wipes it away quickly, embarrassed by her own heart. That night, she walks home through quiet streets, dusted with snow. The city feels softer now, like it is holding its breath along with her. When she reaches her apartment, a single envelope waits at her door. There is no name, only the mark of Ashcroft Dynamics on the seal. Inside, she finds a small card written in Quentin's handwriting. The Ashcroft Foundation requests your presence tomorrow evening at the Haven Community Center. It was your idea once. I just made it real. The next day, Florencia arrives hesitantly. The building is newly renovated, its entrance gleaming with the name, The Haven, just as she once described in her sketches a space for art, for kindness, for second chances. Inside, paintings by local artists hang along the walls, and among them is one of her own. The sketch she once drew of the man by the balcony, now painted in full color. Quentin stands at the far end of the hall, waiting. When he sees her, he does not speak right away. He just looks at her, as if afraid she might vanish. "You built this?" she asks softly. He nods. "You gave me the blueprint," he says. "I only followed it." For a long moment they stand there in silence. Then he adds, "I did not call the press this time. This is just for you." Her eyes glisten. "Why are you doing this, Quentin?" He takes a step closer. "Because you once told me that kindness should not depend on recognition. I finally understand what that means." He hesitates, his voice dropping to a whisper. "And because I need you to know that every choice I made after losing you was to find the courage to be real again." Florencia looks around the room filled with light and color and realizes that he kept his promise, not the one in the contract, but the one that came after. She takes a deep breath, her heart trembling as she says, "You finally learned how to see." He smiles faintly. "I had a good teacher. Ko too." For the first time, the space between them feels safe, not fragile. The noise of the city fades outside, replaced by quiet music from somewhere in the hall. And as they stand there, surrounded by art and redemption, it feels as if the world has finally paused long enough for both of them to breathe. The next morning, sunlight pours through the tall windows of the Haven, turning the glass walls into sheets of gold. Quentin stands alone in the main gallery, hands in his pockets, listening to the quiet hum of life beginning again. The grand opening is over, the guests gone, yet the air still holds the warmth of her presence. He can still see the way Florencia looked last night, surprised, cautious, but no longer angry. She had not promised to stay, but she had not walked away either. For him, that was enough. He looks at her painting again, the one of the man standing by the balcony. The expression she captured in those brushstrokes, lonely but searching, feels like a mirror of his own reflection now. He finally understands what she saw in him all along, and why it terrified him. He thought love was control, that affection was a transaction. But love, he realizes, is surrender. It is the willingness to be seen and still be chosen. The elevator doors open behind him, and her footsteps echo softly across the marble floor. "You are early," he says without turning. "I did not want to miss the sunrise," she replies. He smiles faintly. "Neither did I." She joins him by the window, her eyes tracing the horizon. The city below looks almost peaceful, washed clean after last night's snowfall. "It is beautiful," she says quietly. "It is different when you are not alone," he answers. She looks at him then, truly looks, and for the first time there is no distance between them, only truth. "You once asked me if I would still be here if this was not a contract," she says. "I never answered." He turns to face her. "And now?" She takes a breath, steady but full of feeling. "Now it is not a contract, and I am still here." His heart stumbles over the meaning of those words. He takes her hand gently, his voice low and unsure. "Florencia, I do not have a speech this time. No promises, no conditions. I just know that every morning without you felt wrong." Her eyes shine, tears catching the sunlight. "Then stop choosing wrong," she whispers. He reaches into his coat and pulls out a small box. Inside is the same silver ring she once called fake. Only now the glass stone has been replaced with a diamond, not for its price, but for what it represents. "You said it once," he says softly. "The ring does not make the love real. The feeling does. But I wanted you to have both." For a moment, neither speaks. Then she nods, her voice trembling as she says, "Yes." He slips the ring onto her finger, and for the first time it fits perfectly, as if it had been waiting for this day all along. The world outside seems to fade away. There are no cameras, no contracts, no rules, just a man and a woman who finally stopped pretending. Later that afternoon, they walk through the gallery together, greeting the volunteers, the children, and the artists. Florencia laughs with the kids, guiding their hands through bright colors on a canvas. Quentin watches her, a quiet pride settling in his chest. Every smile, every touch, feels like redemption. When the children finish their painting, she turns to him and holds up the canvas. Across it, in uneven letters, the words read, "Kindness makes everything new." He smiles and whispers, "You see? You are already changing the world." She looks at him and replies, "No, we are." As evening falls, the city lights flicker on, reflecting across the gallery windows like 1,000 little stars. Florencia leans her head against his shoulder, and he wraps his arm around her gently. Outside, snow begins to fall again, soft and endless, but this time it feels like a blessing. In that quiet moment, surrounded by art and second chances, Quentin Ashcroft and Florencia Paredes finally have what no contract could ever create: a love that is honest, equal, and free. The story of the Maid and the Millionaire does not end in wealth or scandal, but in something far rarer: forgiveness, understanding,